Canada might be on a slide from being a developed country to a developing low-income one. First off, we need to understand what low-income and developing economy mean. A low-income economy is where people earn much less compared to global averages, often lacking access to quality services and infrastructure. A developing economy, meanwhile, is one that's growing and trying to improve these standards, but just isn't there yet. Currently, Canada's per capita GDP is sitting at about $52,051, which places it in the higher income category globally. However, Jordan Peterson, a well-known figure, has dubbed Canada a sinking ship, pointing out the falling per capita income. So, in this video, we're going to dive into the troubles hitting Canada's economy, exploring how these issues could drag it into the low-income zone, and discussing how Canada got to this shaky spot. But hey, before we start unraveling these economic threads, make sure to like and subscribe if you're into dissecting what's up with Canada's economy and beyond. Your support means that we can keep bringing content like this to the table. Let's talk about the first problem with Canada's economy, its declining living standard. The issue of Canada's real GDP per capita sagging, despite overall economic growth, is a multifaceted problem that has roots in both recent and long-standing trends. While Canada has posted solid headline growth figures in recent years, its performance in terms of standard of living, measured as real GDP per capita, has not kept pace, especially when compared to the United States and other advanced economies. This underperformance became more pronounced after the 2014 to 2015 oil price shock, and continued through the pandemic, with little sign of imminent improvement. One might be tempted to blame this on Canada's fast-growing population, which indeed expands the denominator in per capita calculations. But the heart of the issue lies in the growth of the economy itself, the numerator in these calculations. This indicates deeper productivity issues rather than just demographic changes. Despite regional strengths, particularly in commodity-based economies like Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Newfoundland and Labrador, the overall Canadian economy has struggled to sustain its past growth momentum. Examining Canada's economic history reveals that it used to match or even outperform other G7 countries in terms of GDP growth. However, post-pandemic data shows a significant downturn, especially in per capita terms. Population growth, while historically robust, only slightly outpaces other advanced economies recently, suggesting that the problem isn't just about more people, but about how much economic output is being generated per person. The lagging productivity in Canada has been attributed to insufficient investment in areas that boost efficiency, such as non-residential structures, machinery, equipment, and particularly in innovation and research and development, or R&D. Canada's R&D spending has declined over the last 2 decades, creating an innovation gap compared to its G7 counterparts. Furthermore, the distribution of economic gains has been uneven across provinces, with only British Columbia and Prince Edward Island managing to bounce back to pre-pandemic per capita GDP levels. The outlook for improvement is bleak, with projections showing continued underperformance in real GDP per capita growth, underscoring the need for a strategic shift towards enhancing productivity and economic efficiency. This situation highlights a critical challenge for Canada. While it can boast of a resilient and expanding population, translating these demographic advantages into real per capita economic gains requires addressing the underlying productivity issues. Without significant changes in how the economy grows and becomes more efficient, Canada risks a prolonged period of stagnation or declining living standards, despite having a strong track record of headline GDP growth. The second issue is Canada's housing crisis. Canada's housing crisis is intricately tied to its economic trajectory, revealing deep-rooted issues affecting both immediate economic stability and long-term growth. As the population surges with an average annual increase of 600,000 people over the past 5 years, the housing supply has failed to keep up, leading to a stark imbalance. Demand far outstrips the construction of new homes, which peaked at 320,000 units in 2022. This discrepancy has escalated housing prices, pushing affordability out of reach for many Canadians. The economic ramifications of this housing shortage are multifaceted. On one hand, the rise in property values has initially buoyed consumer wealth and spending. However, as the situation worsens, the lack of affordable housing becomes a constraint on economic growth. High housing costs limit consumer spending in other areas, leading to reduced economic diversity. Investment in the housing sector has waned in response to the rising interest rates and escalating construction costs, further straining the market. These economic pressures complicate short-term recovery efforts and could potentially shape the political landscape for years to come, as housing policy becomes a central issue in federal elections. Effective policy response requires a balance between immediate relief and long-term strategic planning. The goal is to cool down inflation and realign interest rates with economic growth, thus enabling a more sustainable housing market. Political interventions, while aiming to stabilize the housing sector, must navigate the complex interplay of interest rates, investment dynamics, and immigration trends, which collectively influence the real estate market. Canada's housing dilemma reflects broader economic challenges, including the need for strategic infrastructure investment, regulatory reform, and innovation in housing finance and construction. Addressing the housing crisis is not just about building more homes, but also about creating a balanced and accessible market that supports Canada's economic aspirations and improves the quality of life for its residents. Matthew Mei's research at the University of Ottawa and the Institute of Fiscal Studies and Democracy, IFSD, highlights the urgent need for comprehensive strategies that address both the symptoms and root causes of Canada's housing shortage, ensuring that economic growth and population dynamics align with housing availability and affordability. The third issue is the movement away from natural resources, one of Canada's biggest strengths. The broad oil and gas sector's contribution to Canada's economy is significant, yet there are plans under Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's administration to shift away from this industry, a move that some critics argue is aimed at garnering votes. Despite Canada's status as one of the most resource-rich countries in the world, this transition could pose substantial risks to the national economy. Trudeau's government has been emphasizing the need to transition to renewable energy sources and reduce dependence on fossil fuels, reflecting a broader global trend and response to climate change concerns. However, this shift, while aligning with environmental and sustainability goals, raises questions about the economic repercussions for a country that has heavily relied on its natural resource sectors as economic drivers. The oil and gas sector, as illustrated by 2019 data, is not only a significant contributor to GDP and employment, but also an integral part of Canada's export and investment landscape. Moving away from this sector could potentially lead to job losses, economic instability, and reduced national income, especially if the transition is not managed with a clear, sustainable alternative path for economic growth and development. Given the substantial role that the oil and gas industry plays in Canada's economy, any abrupt policy shifts aimed at phasing out this sector could be very detrimental. The challenge lies in balancing environmental objectives with economic realities, ensuring that the transition does not undermine Canada's economic strengths, but rather capitalizes on its vast resource wealth in a more sustainable and innovative manner. The third issue is Canada's debt. Canada's national debt is a growing concern, with Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland's fall economic statement highlighting the anticipated spike in debt service costs. The federal government's sizable debt, exacerbated by continuous deficits and further inflated by pandemic-related spending, has led to a situation where public debt charges will consume a much larger portion of Ottawa's revenue than in recent years. The Fall Economic Statement reveals a complicated economic forecast for Canada, with expectations of avoiding a recession but facing significantly slowed economic growth. This slowdown comes alongside projections of rising unemployment and substantial new spending initiatives, primarily aimed at housing and climate-friendly projects. While these investments are crucial, they add to the fiscal pressures of an already indebted government. Interest rates, now at a 20-year high, significantly increase the cost of servicing the national debt. The sharp rise from $20.3 billion in 2020 to 2021 to projected charges of $60.7 billion in 2028 to 2029 underscores the heavy financial burden that debt servicing will impose on Canada's budget, limiting fiscal flexibility. Critics argue that the Trudeau administration's spending habits, particularly the shift away from the economically significant oil and gas sector, may be politically motivated and could exacerbate the country's financial challenges. Canada's resource-rich economy, once buoyed by the oil and gas industry, is at a crossroads, with policy decisions steering it away from these traditional economic pillars. This transition, while part of a broader environmental and sustainability agenda, carries substantial economic risks, especially given the burgeoning national debt. The federal government's focus on spending for immediate political gains, such as the expansive housing initiatives and climate action plans, while necessary for long-term sustainability and social welfare, must be balanced against the economic implications of growing national debt and diminishing fiscal room. In this complex economic landscape, the government faces the challenge of managing substantial debt service costs and transitioning towards a more sustainable, albeit less resource-dependent, economic model. The balancing act between maintaining fiscal health and pursuing necessary public policy goals defines the current economic discourse in Canada, with significant implications for the country's future prosperity and financial stability. Canada is navigating through a period of economic recalibration, facing the dual challenges of transforming its resource-based economy and managing a growing national debt. The shift away from fossil fuels, while necessary for environmental sustainability, must be approached with careful consideration of its economic impact, especially in a country endowed with vast natural resources. Similarly, the housing crisis and the surge in public debt require strategic, long-term solutions that balance immediate needs with fiscal sustainability. As Canada addresses these intertwined economic issues, the decisions made today will shape the country's economic landscape for years to come. Ensuring that Canada remains a prosperous and developed nation calls for policies that not only respond to current challenges, but also anticipate future ones, fostering an economy that is resilient, diversified, and sustainable. Thank you for watching, and if you found this analysis insightful, don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos that delve into the complexities of Canada's economy and beyond. Your support helps us continue exploring and explaining the crucial economic trends that affect us all.